But when we're in that state where we've kind of got nowhere to go, that's one of the great things about that space, is because you're questioning everything. You've got nowhere to go. You can't escape these questions that are just like they've become you. You know, you are these questions now. Like there's no putting it off, and you've just got to be with the truth of those questions, that the truth and the fact that these are the questions that are making you up right now. And that takes you into kind of close contact with yourself, how you actually really feel about certain things that are going on. What is that thing actually?
This is Way of the Artist with Brandon Colby Cook and Evan Schulte.
Identifying your blocks and demystifying your struggles
so that you can claim your own path
and make your life a work of art.
Oh, folks, can you relate to this one? Are you looking at your news feed, too much social media, or just the television, or whatever the hell it is? Maybe it's none of those things. Maybe it's just your life situation in all of the kind of craziness that is life right now, and you are questioning absolutely everything. This seems like a topic that was staring us right in the face for the last year.
I agree.
But here it is, maybe better late than never, or maybe this is perfect timing for this conversation. Let's go with that one. Let's go with that, with that angle on it. I'm really excited and interested in seeing where this conversation heads into, because there's so much that it can dive into. I think I sort of tried to put some of it in a nutshell there at the beginning of, there's all the stuff that's going on around us, all the stuff that people are telling us, all of, there's everyone's propaganda on one level or another. I use that word on a very broad basis, not propaganda and maybe in the classic sense of, people are trying to manipulate you, but propaganda in the sense of everybody's got their fucking opinion that they want you to buy into. And we all participate in that thing at different times of our life and continue to do it. But then there's also that element of, sometimes we're at a point in our own lives, things that are going on in our lives are not working, I guess, for lack of a better expression. And we're questioning our decisions. We're questioning our actions. We're questioning, where we are, what we're doing, where we're going. Everything is up for grabs, and that can be a tremendously scary thing to have happen. It can be a tremendously confusing thing. Those things usually kind of go hand in hand, confusion and fear, as well as anger. Those are that's a nice little potent threesome that like to that generally hang around together. So, yeah, man, let's talk about this.
Yeah, let's dive in. Well, what to say? I think the thing is, it's good to question everything, but it's really challenging when you kind of find yourself there and you didn't necessarily plan to get there. Like you kind of just stumble into it and you're all of a sudden you're for lack of a better phrasing, you're what the fuck? What the fuck? What the fuck? Everything's just what the fuck all the time. And I think it's kind of a good thing because, maybe there's certain things that have been taken for granted. Maybe there's certain paradigms that need to be shifted or broken or whatever. I know for myself, personally related to this topic a little bit, it's I see the box in which my mind is kind of living within, and it's like creating limits. And when I start to question that stuff, it kind of breaks through those limits. And it also feels like, another analogy I might use, it almost feels like dropping, or pulling up an anchor that's been like hanging on something. And like all of a sudden you're free of it. And you're like, wait a minute, if I'm free of that, then what could I do over here? And it kind of, that, like, that's the form of questioning everything. It's like, if I didn't have this, what could I do instead? And then, it kind of, all of a sudden, that can be very expansive, and that can lead to many, many more questions. And all of a sudden it's absolutely everything. And now you're overwhelmed, but you're like, well, hey, I think it's a good thing. We're going to try and navigate it. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I'm the thing that I think at least I really want to grab onto here, in what you were saying, is the good thing, because I think that this whole thing of like questioning everything, very often, not always the case, but very often there's that sort of met with this emotional sense of dread, because when you're questioning everything, it's like your foundations are falling apart. Things are crumbling around you. What you thought you knew, what you thought was safe and secure, or whatever it is no longer working. It's falling apart. It's cracking at the seams. And so now all of these questions come up, and it can be a very frightening thing. But I think that, one of the major things that we can begin to reframe, or like we can question that, we can question that sense of fear that we have around the questioning. It's like, well, that questioning, like any time in human history where someone has really deeply questioned things, we've made incredible strides. We've discovered new things. We've learned new things. We've evolved in all kinds of ways because of people who faced these exact types of situations. We're like, hang on a second, hang on. I'm looking around and everybody is saying things are this way, but that shit just don't add up.
Yeah.
Maybe across the board, but maybe just for you. There's all kinds of ways that can take shape of, but I think that, one of the big things around questioning and when it's has this disruptive effect in our lives, what I think is at one of the big things at the core of that has got to be sort of models that we have inherited. Models of life and living and what you're supposed to do, who you're supposed to be, all of that stuff. That's very often in that state of questioning absolutely everything. That's the stuff that we're questioning, because we're like, hang on, I was sold this sort of bill of goods and I bought it. I bought it, which I think is an important thing to acknowledge. It's like, okay, and maybe maybe we were taken advantage of in certain ways and maybe misled and all of that, but we brought it on to ourselves and we started living our lives according to the model of that somebody else had set forth before us. Whether that's, it could be an individual, but maybe, and perhaps more likely, it's more of a convention. It's a societal convention that we've sort of accepted, and we live by tons of them. It's not, you don't have to look very far to see where these are taking place in our lives, stuff that we just kind of accept as being true. It's like, people have questioned, for example, the 8-hour the work day and the five-day work week, and said, well, hang on, do we need to actually be here for 8 hours? Do we actually need to be in this space for 5 days a week? And it's a lot of the times it's met with a great deal of backlash, right? There's usually a community, but at the same time, just asking that question makes us go, yeah, is that necessary? Why has that become the established norm in our culture? And especially when you start to look at the amounts of stress, anxiety, pressure that people are under today. And that's the thing. Those are the things that make us begin to question those things and begin to open new possibilities for us, which I think is part of that good thing. I know I've been talking a lot here, but I think that, that questioning, it opens up new pathways, new opportunities, things that we didn't see, because that questioning in and of itself is the unknown. We are just launched. I think maybe that's kind of a cool thing I'm just discovering. It's like that questioning is like you've been thrust into the unknown. And the context with which we're talking about it, that's somewhat unwillingly. We've been kind of unwillingly thrust into the unknown, and it's like, deal with it, figure it out.
Yeah, you brought up great stuff. I want to say that challenging the status quo, like challenging the way we do things and the way we've done things for a long time, there's something in that can be very difficult, I think, for all of us, right? It's like, well, people have done it this way, and this way has kind of worked. And, maybe that's the way my parents did it, grandparents, my great grandparents, and there's patterns that get passed down to us. And if you're in the place now in your life where you're going to break that pattern and you're starting to see that pattern actually isn't the best, then that could be a great opportunity. But it can also be frightening, because now it's like, well, if I don't do it this way, which is the only way I've ever known, then how would I do it? And you don't know that answer yet. And that's kind of, I think, the frightening thing. And that's where a lot of the fear comes up. And the other part of that is, well, how do I put this? It's like you're going to be told that you're wrong, because other people are very comfortable with what they think they know. So you're going to have to face that, because people become entitled to the way things have always been done. And they like it because it's predictable and they can expect it. And so when you go, well, I'm not going to do that, not only are you going to get things like people going, well, that won't work and that doesn't make sense, because it doesn't make sense to them. But also you might come across things like jealousy and envy, because now you're doing something and they're like, they don't like the idea that maybe you're getting a free ride. That's how they might look at it. Like, there's all sorts of projections and assumptions that come on when you challenge ideas. But here's my key point, Evan, and I just want to kind of say this and make sure it gets out there. A lot of people do things and they don't even know why they do things. Like they don't have reasons that are beyond the surface. So, for example, why do we have speeding limits? If you go down to it, well, speed limits stop potential accidents. Well, why do we want to stop potential accidents? It's another question. Well, we want to stop accidents because we don't want to cause damage. We don't want people to get hurt. So why do we have speeding limits? Well, we have speeding limits for safety, for protection, for whatever. But most people follow speed limits because they'll get in trouble if they don't. But they don't actually really think about why they do it. Now, that's maybe a bit more of an obvious example, but there's tons of shit like that. There's tons of stuff where we do, and we don't even know why we do them. And we think we know why, but we have never really stopped to really ask and go like deeper down into the reasoning. So I think questioning everything is absolutely everything. Is kind of going deeper into that rabbit hole and going, wait a minute, why do I do this? Why do I work 40 hours a week? Why do I work 5 days instead of 4? Like, well, I have to, because if I don't, that's how my job works. That's how it works at this company. It's like, well, what if there is another company? Like, what if there's another way? But people just kind of get caught in it, right? They go, I can't do that. That's not how it works. It's like, well, maybe it needs to work differently.
Yeah. And it's, what's coming to my mind in this, it's sort of the the very well, or the sort of the acclaimed book, The 4 Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss. Like that's, you know, that's just such an encapsulation of a person who really questioned the model of things. I mean, he even talks about that, I think, in the intro of his book. I started it, I haven't finished it, but you know, there's the beginning of that book is really kind of wonderful in the sense of like he's taking you through that process of questioning, you know, these moments of his life of being like, hang on a second, what am I doing here? You know, like I've started this business doing just this weird kind of random thing. I'm putting in all of this time doing it. Like, is this the life that I want? And partially because that's the expectation. Well, no, that you put in those hours and you become a success and you grow and you grow and you grow and you grow and you perpetual growth, because apparently the goal is to become, everyone is to become Jeff Bezos or some shit like that. You know, like who knows? Like what's the end to it? When is it enough? And you know, he started to figure out for himself that's like, hang on, like I want to think more about my life in terms of a lifestyle. What is the lifestyle that I want? Not in some retirement future, but right now. What is that thing that I want to start to cultivate? And he comes up with this and figures out this 4-hour work week. You know, I'm sure it's not a rigid formula of you work 4 hours a week and that's it. You know, that's not really what it's about, because then you're just buying into another model that somebody else has given you. But I like to look at it more as it, in the lines of what we're talking about, is like it brings up a big and important question around an aspect of our lives that is huge. Work is one of the biggest, pieces of our life in the way that things are right now. Brandon, I talked to you about this, like, I think a few weeks ago. Saw this philosopher on Big Think, and he was talking about this thing, and he was raising this point about this statement that we have of work-life balance. You know, it's like having a good work-life balance. And he raised, again, kind of a question about it, which also was a point, which is that, like, well, hang on a second. Are we saying that work is half of the picture, and then the rest of life, all of the other things in life, are the other half? Like love, relationships, families, friendships, leisure, philosophizing, thinking, questioning, like all of like that. Everything else in life is just the other half to work, and how everything was revolving around that thing. So, I mean, I think we're talking about this one specific thing, a lot in this conversation right now, but I think just because it is such, work is one of the easiest things for us to identify as being something that we've accepted to a large degree without necessarily questioning to a large degree. Something where even if we're miserable about it, we just go, it's like, well, that's just the way it is, and I'm working hard, so you better be fucking working hard.
Yeah.
And we start pointing our fingers, and we start making it for everyone else until someone comes along and it's just like, yeah, well, what if you could work 4 hours a week and actually make a lot of money doing that,
mm-hmm.
and have a lifestyle that you enjoy? Is that possible? And venturing into it, like, what an incredible thing that comes out of questioning everything.
I agree. And it means breaking paradigms. It means bending them. It means altering them. For example, the one paradigm that the way you earn money is by trading your time, which is it's, and I don't mean this to insult anybody, but it's a low class view of earning. Trading your time for money, your time is the most invaluable thing you will ever have, because you can never get more of it. It's precious. Things pass and they go and they're gone forever. And that time that you have, it is everything. It is your most valuable resource as far as whatever you have. And you're going to give that away for sometimes minimum wage and sometimes this other stuff. Now, I get minimum wage as a temporary solution to getting experience and trading for experience so that you can kind of figure some things out. But as a long-term plan, and I'm not even talking about like minimum wage. I'm talking about even a good wage. Like your time is just, and I'm not saying that you're wrong for doing it, but anybody who says, well, that's the way it's done and that's the way it needs to be done, it's like that is a very limited view of how you can earn, and the other side of earning is closely related to contribution. Now, some people earn a lot of money without contributing anything. So, contribution doesn't always balance out. Like some people contribute less and earn more, but really, earning has a relationship to contribution. It does, but the thing is like contribution can be subjective. Like it's one thing if you're building a brick house and you contribute, 300 bricks and then someone else contributes 200 bricks. And for your 300 bricks, you get paid, a little bit more than the other person because you contributed more, right? I mean, that's a way of measurement. But thinking that the world works this way is just totally naive because often someone does, 300 bricks and the other person does 200 bricks in this analogy, and they get paid the same. And that doesn't feel fair, does it? So we need to kind of question this and go, okay, well, should I be getting paid for my time or should I be getting paid for my contribution? And then you just starting to break the model on how you look at how things work, and this is what's going to allow you to be able to say, ask for more, earn more, think differently, and these are little changes, little tweaks to the way you see the world that can maybe, and the other thing I want to say about this, getting all jealous and upset and mad because you're working harder and someone's working less, that's not a good strategy. That's a shit strategy because all that does is cause animosity and problems between you and that person and you and the environment you're in. If you look at it and go, hey, like this person does half the work I do, I do this amount of work. Well, you know what? Maybe you need to present your case. Maybe you need to look at like, okay, well, it's not about getting mad at that person. It's about looking at the structure, and maybe there's something else you're missing, so you got to ask that question.
Mm-hmm. And maybe, the question is a completely different environment altogether. Maybe an environment where, the people who are giving the most are acknowledged and recognized. And, who knows, there's all sorts, that's the beauty of the sort of the questioning mind, is that it opens up all kinds of different doors, and it never really stops. You know what I mean? Like it's active and it's alive and and really responsive and finds different opportunities. And I think that that's the mark of a great artist. Like we've been talking about this in a very sort of a very sort of practical, grounded kind of way. But we are way of the artist, and and questions are a huge part of what an artist does. Artists are constantly, as we were saying, like challenging the status quo, looking at the way that our societies run, looking at how we conduct ourselves as individuals, from how we are collectively to how we are individually, examining that, questioning that, wondering about it, and finding some kind of expression for it, finding some sort of creative way to say something about that. It's fascinating because it's really not so so dissimilar from, how we kind of have to make decisions, the decisions that come from the questions that we start asking, especially when, go ahead.
No, you bring up a really good point. You start asking new questions, you start making new decisions, because these questions, they open up doors that were not even in your peripheral. They weren't even in your mind. The question opens a door, and then all of a sudden you're in another room and you see another door and you go through that door, and all of a sudden you're in some place that you didn't even know existed. And then that gives you the option to take actions that you never could have taken. So the questions, every question opens a new door to a new thing. And it lets you explore something that was, the door was closed. And if you didn't even know the door was there, then you didn't even know there was a room or a place that existed in that spot, right? So you only know what you know. But the key thing is with questioning everything, absolutely everything, is recognizing that there's a lot of stuff I don't know. So let me start asking some questions, because there's obviously some things I'm not seeing. So let me start to look into this. And there might be 1,000 different directions that you need to investigate. And I think, Evan, you gave me some advice before we started this, because I was sharing my life story and things that were going on. And you said, start small, start with one thing. And I take that as, one question, one door, go through one door, find one new room, explore that, investigate that, go down that rabbit hole, and then you can come out of it, go down another one. You don't have to go down all 1,000 at the same time.
Yeah.
Which I think is the overwhelm, and this, something we haven't mentioned yet, but that's probably something I think a lot of our listeners are probably experiencing to some degree, with all the chaos with social media and news and propaganda and opinions and points of view that are going on. It's really easy to feel overwhelmed. I don't know who to trust. I don't know what to believe. I don't know what's real, what isn't real, all of that. But I think you kind of need to put a pin in a lot of stuff and say, okay, well, let's look at this one. Let's look at this thing and see, what do I think about that? And then come out of that, go as far as you feel you need to go, and then come out of that and then look down another one. And I think eventually some of these things will start to kind of coagulate. They'll kind of come together, and you'll start to see parallels. Maybe when you investigated one thing, it actually gave you some information you needed to investigate another thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's I'm realizing as well, that state of questioning, I think it's something that to some degree, we're all engaged with probably all the time at some level. It's not like we're just never asking questions and then suddenly, that they all happen. But we are talking, I think, a lot about, when we're in that space of what the fuck is real right now, with anything, what is my purpose? The big sort of questions sort of that haunt us and can keep us up at night. One of the weird sort of beautiful things about that is it gets us really present. It can get us really honest with ourselves, which is an easy thing for us to delude ourselves and distract us from, in our day-to-day life. It's a super easy thing to do. But when we're in that state where we've kind of got nowhere to go, that's one of the great things about that space, is because you're questioning everything. You've got nowhere to go. You can't escape these questions that are just they've become you. You are these questions now. There's no putting it off. And you've just got to be with the truth of those questions, that the truth and the fact that these are the questions that are making you up right now, and that takes you into kind of close contact with yourself, how you actually really feel about certain things that are going on. What is that thing actually? And in my own experience, very often it's oh shit, I've known this for a long time. I know that I've been feeling this way or thinking this way about this situation or this situation for a long time. But now I'm finally in a place where I can look at it in this state of questioning, and I can, there's something now meaningful about it. There's action that I have to take on this now, because there's no distracting myself from it. And I mean, just to put kind of a specific example to this, like recently for myself, I've put like a whole new sort of, I've created new boundaries for myself, because of a lot of the things that we're talking about, social media and news, and it's just even more, generally my phone, my relationship with my phone. I've changed some things around my relationship with that thing because of the confusion, because I'm just getting people yelling. It doesn't matter what sort of side of whatever argument, people are just yelling. And my engagements with what I'm doing here are becoming compulsive. And they're not doing anything enriching to my life. They're distracting me from things that matter. And my own sense of well-being is off. But I keep kind of coming back out of it because like, oh, well, I need to be informed in this or that, or keep up on this or that. And kind of realizing that it's like, you know what, like me taking some space from this does not make me a bad person. Like that me taking some space to become more centered for myself is not a bad thing. So it's like I was questioning sort of some of my own patterns, some of my own habits of what my day-to-day life was looking like. And now I've got a thing where it's just like, I don't even take my phone out of airplane mode until I've done my meditation in the morning, until I've done some reading. So like something, and it's usually, I'm usually reading something, enriching for myself, something philosophical or what have you. So until I've meditated, read, and done a little bit of journaling, done a little bit of writing, until I have done those three things, it's not even a question of whether I look at my phone. Like it's just off the table for me to do that. And I've got to say, like, just my mental state from that is just in a completely different space. And once I've done all those things, like, okay, now I'm going to choose to turn on my phone now. I'm going to choose to go. I'm going to, I still have boundaries over where I decide to get my information from. It's definitely not on the Facebook homepage or Twitter, I'll tell you that much. But, I have my channels, and I go and I'll have a quick gander and engage with what I want to engage with. And honestly, like I've actually found that even when my phone is on now, when I'm at that point where I can engage with it again, because of that boundary that I've given myself at the beginning of the day, I'm less compulsive with it for the rest of the day. I'm engaging with it for less of the day, and I'm spending more time to like be outside and spend time with my wife and my cats and cooking and just, doing things in my life creatively. I have way more focus on those sort of things as being a priority.
That's amazing. I mean, that's great discipline, man. And I think, a lot of people can take something from that. It's
but it's freedom. Sorry, just to cut in there. It's like, I'm becoming more and more convinced that discipline and freedom, like we've talked about this in the sense that like they're sides of the same coin, but like they are the same thing. Real discipline is actually freedom. And this sort of thing where it's like, oh, I've got to be disciplined, like, and with my phone, it's like, it is actually freedom. I'm like, oh my God, I'm free from my phone. I'm free from this thing that had some sort of a hold over me and was doing nothing but creating confusion, creating anger, creating whatever. And yeah, it brought me to a place of questioning what I was doing, but then it gave me clarity. You know, like that questioning led me to a place of action that was meaningful. So sorry, I just had to jump in there. Please go ahead.
It's great. I mean, well, we live in a time where things want our attention. That's their currency. They want our attention, and they'll give us stuff for free, quote unquote, because it's getting your attention, and your attention, your time, your energy. You know, it's you're giving it that, and you're getting what it's giving you. And I think the thing is, you got to ask: is my attention, is my time worth this? You know, and I think when you're drawing those types of disciplines, you're saying like my meditation, my writing, my reading are more important than what's going on with somebody's, you know, life on Facebook or some political bullshit, you know, that's occurring right now, which, you know, all of that stuff. It's like, you got to ask, like, is this really nourishing me? Is this really feeding me? Like, and I think one of the other things too is when you start asking, like, am I bullshitting myself? Am I lying to myself? Am I deceiving myself? Those are good questions because they actually start to get to the core of like honesty. And I personally think that most of us are totally bullshitting ourselves. We're totally lying to ourselves. We have all sorts of tricks and we think we're getting away with it. But when we stop and we think about it and we investigate it, you know, you realize you're the culprit. You realize you're the thief. You're the one that is totally participating in a bunch of stuff that is not helping you. And, you know, you can ask the questions like, if I do this, you know, like, let's say you scroll through Facebook and argue with people online, you know, that's what you do, right? And you do that and you go like, if I keep doing this, where is it going to get me? What's it going to do with my life? How is it going to help? You start asking questions like that. Like, if I was going to die in a year and I did this all year, is this really how I would have wanted to spend that year? You know, questions like this, right? Things that start to provoke your mind into going like, wait a minute, why am I doing this? Like, how important is this? I mean, the whole thing, you brought up another good point is like, well, I need to look at the news because I need to stay up to date. I need to know what's going on. I mean, do you? Do you really? I mean, let's be honest. Like, do you really? Does it really matter? You know, how much of this news is the real news? How much of this is really what's happening? How much of this actually matters? You know that most people think that murder and crime are way up, that they happen more and more. Most people think this, but it's actually way, way down. But if you look at the news, you're going to think that it's happening more and more and more. You know that you could say that back, like, I don't know, several hundred years ago, like the murder rate was maybe like maybe something like, let's just say it was something, it's just something extremely high, right? Like if you go back like 1,000 years, it's like 50% of people murder. Can you imagine if 50% of people murdered today? Like how fucking crazy that would be? Well, actually now it's like a very, very small percent, like maybe a 1%, maybe people murder. And yeah, those are notable. But the thing is, it's like we're way, way better than we ever were. And that goes for all sorts of crime and all sorts of violence and all sorts of things like that. So news is not real news because you're only getting the sensationalized, glamorized, the things that sell, the things that capture your attention. And if you just look at that and you don't look at all the other things, it fucks with your perception of the world. And then when your perception is messed up, it's very hard for you to navigate a world that you don't see accurately, right? Like, and none of us really see it fully accurately, but that, like, it's really askew. The news really will make your, you know, so maybe a few details you need to know, but after that, it's like, let it go, move on, you know? Okay, this thing happened. Like, do you really need to know everything, every little detail?
Yeah.
And if you did, what are you going to do about it? You know what I mean? And if it's nothing, then who cares?
Yeah. Yeah. There's a mass thing with, like, you know, so much of the news and information we take in, most of it is stuff that we can't actually do anything about.
Yes.
Which has such you know, it gives us such a feeling of helplessness and powerlessness. And again, because, you know, the media has very for a very long time, not just recently, but for a very long time, is deals in extremes, and usually in extremes leaning in one direction, right? And that's a whole conversation itself as to why that is, and sort of why we gravitate towards that whole thing. There's a very interesting relationship that's going on there. But I mean, yeah, like in terms of like what you were talking about with time, you go back a long time ago and I mean like a long time ago, like you can pretty much in any past sort of generations, the speed with which we get information has increased, right? But you look at a time when, the only news that you got was from the newspaper. When that was your source of information of what was going on in the world, what was going on in, your community, what have you. The world kept on turning. You know what I mean? Like the people were not inundated with the information that we are today, and the world kept turning. Not everything that little thing that goes on in the world needs to be commented on. Not every little thing that occurs needs everybody's input on the subject. I think that's part of it, where it's like, I think that we can get, we think that like, oh, well, if I don't say something or do something, on this, if I don't comment on this video or this fucking on this tweet, this twit, Freudian
I like
slip.
that better.
Yeah.
This twit.
But if I don't do something about this, then, no one else will, and the whole world's gonna, go to shit. And, there is a time and a place to speak up about things, but usually those moments are pretty clear, but now it's like, it's a situation where it's just like, it's just constant all the time. And it's like, are you actually helping anything? Are you actually doing anything positive? Or are you just contributing to the noise of confusion that's going on out there? And those are some important questions to ask too. We've kind of gone off onto like an interesting space right now of just like questioning some stuff that's going on right now. But
yeah, well, I mean, it all relates, and I think we can navigate this, back onto the core idea of what we're trying to talk about. I do want to say one thing though about all of this, which is that, it's like, at the end of the day, like, actually, no, let me say it this way. A friend of mine pointed this out, and he said, people are going to constantly try to get you to go along their path with them. And you have to ask yourself, do I want to go along this path? Do I want to go along this way with them? So he used the example. He says, I'm driving through traffic and someone cuts me off, and then I get pissed off and I want to cut them off. And then all of a sudden we're in an accident, and now there's a thing about it and blah, 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 blah. And he's like, they dragged me down that path, and I chose to go with them. So he's like, someone cuts me off. I look at it this way. I don't know where they're going. I don't know what their path is. Let them go, because that's not the path that I want to be on. But their path merged with his momentarily, and he had an emotional response, and those emotional responses can make you go and get off your track, get off the way you're going. And I feel like, this relates to the news and these social media posts and all this stuff. It's like, you look at a post and it's provocative, and you think, man, I could say something about that. But do you want to go down that path? Is that where you want to go? Or do you have another path? And these are the kind of questions I think we need to ask. We need to ask, like, is this really the way that I want to go? Because someone's dragging you there. Like, have no question about that. People are always trying to sell you all the time. Come down this way, do this with me. And sometimes they're doing it forcefully, and sometimes they're doing it in a nice way or a friendly way. But you really got to ask yourself, if I go down this path, where does this lead me? And do I want to go there? And do I want to go with them? And do I want to experience what I would experience or might experience if I go down that way? And I think, as you get older and you get more experience, you start to go, no, fuck no. Honestly, fuck no. I don't want to go down that path, and I'm not joining your energy, and I'm not going to join your point of view, and I just don't even want to bother. So, carry on, and I'm going to carry on, and let's just move on, and I think we've got to have that kind of discipline, and I think that's where the discipline and freedom kind of relates back to this. It is the discipline to not go along a path of somebody that provokes you is what gives you freedom to go down your own path.
Yeah, and you could even flip the way that, you said it, the freedom to not, follow somebody else's path. That's sort of the discipline, as opposed to the discipline to not follow creative freedom. Yeah. You know what I mean? You know what I mean?
Whatever floats your boat.
Yeah.
Okay, you know what? I want to do a beer break.
Okay.
I know we're not. I know we're not at the end, but I feel like it's a good intermission moment. We can kind of redirect course after. But I'll go first. I've been drinking this one all week because I got a case of it, and I was like, well, let's try it. It was a real big commitment to something I had no idea about. But it's Vancouver Island Brewing. It's a collaboration series with Roslyn Beer Co. and Red Mountain Resort. Whatever, but it's a black IPA, 6.8% alcohol. It's pretty good. I mean, honestly, not my favorite. I don't really like dark beers a lot. I don't mind them. This one's kind of nice because it is a lager, so it has kind of a lightness to it. But at the same time, you're like, is this an ale? Like a kind of a.
Did you say it was a lager or an IPA?
Oh, it's an IPA. Never mind.
Okay.
It's black IPA. Yeah, so it's a little bit.
It's strong.
It's strong. It's strong, and it's because it's darker. It's like very rich. So I mean, maybe this would be better in the winter. But I was kind of thinking, oh, that might be nice, like a darker kind of beer in the summer. But actually, now that I look at the can, it's got like snowy mountains, like a ski hill. As I look closer at it. So you know what? I think this is a winter beer that I just ended up picking up kind of when it's getting hotter out. So I think that kind of has something to do with it. It's good though. Yeah. I mean, it's going down easy enough. It's fine, but it's, maybe I'd change my mind if it was like the middle of winter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got to say that's because, you go for like those dark, like those dark lagers but like, man, a dark IPA, you bought a case of it, man. I don't know if I would take that risk. That's for me is like, I'll try like a one-off of that and then see how I feel. I'm drinking a pepper lime lager from Dead Frog Brewery in Langley, BC. And I bought a case of this as well, or a six pack of.
You kind of took a risk too this week.
Yeah, I thought I'm like, that sounds like it'll probably be really good. And I had one, the day that I got it, and I was kind of like, ooh, I don't know how I feel about this purchase, this decision that I've made. Maybe it was because it wasn't totally cold yet, but I've been this is the second time I've had it, and it's good. I'm enjoying it much more the second time than I did the first time. It's definitely got like that lime is in there. Like you can taste that lime. It almost kind of, I don't quite know how to characterize it, but yeah. And then the pepper, you notice there's sort of like a little sort of something to it. And, it's interesting. It's probably not for everyone because I think it can almost come across a little bit, floral, or it's very kind of like there's some kind of a quality to it that might put people off of it, but yeah, it's going down well today, so I'm not going to argue.
I mean, that's kind of the fun thing about doing these. We have a different beer, and I try to push myself to try something different. I mean, there was some other things that I'd had before, and I'm like, oh, I really like that. But, there, honestly, at the place I went to, we've had a lot of beers at this point, and they didn't have a lot of things that I hadn't had yet. So I was like, okay, well, you know, and it was really between this and maybe a couple others. And I was kind of like, well, let's try it. You know what? I'm glad I tried it. And actually, it was a small case. It was only 4, and this is the 4th. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of fun to try some new things. And you know what? I'm usually like, oh, this beer's great and I love it. You know, I'm gonna say that this one's middle of the road for me, but I'm also gonna say that I've gone through the case of 4 and I have enjoyed it. And I think I would enjoy it more in the winter. That's really where I'm gonna leave it. I might revisit this one another time, but yeah, there you go. So I just had to add that in. But it's nice, you know, we're trying some different things. And I think, you know, that's, you know, to kind of lead us back into our conversation. I mean, um, you know, asking the question, like maybe should I try something different? Like maybe there's a different way to do this. Something you brought up to me before we started this conversation was, you know, for the last year or so, almost 2 years, I guess now, I've been working a regular job, which, you know, and it's been a full-time job, which is very unique for me because most of the time I've spent working for myself and doing my own thing and being creative and whatever. And as much as working a full-time job has been nice, it's created certain stability and consistency and things that you don't really get when you're full-time artists. What I found is like I do the job and then I'm tired at the end of the day and I don't really want to do my creative stuff because I'm worn out. And then all of a sudden I'm up the next day and I'm back to work and then I'm putting all this energy into work and the same thing just kind of repeats itself. And I remember back in the day, you were working for like a restaurant and you're like, I'm going to cut myself back to like, I think you first did it to 3 days and then you're like, I'm going to do it to 2 days. And then you started to realize like, hey, I can get by on a couple of days. And I remember being really kind of, I thought that was really cool because I didn't really get it, but I did get it in a way because to me, it was kind of like, well, you're kind of buying back your time, you know? And you kind of gave me back the advice just before we started this. It's like, hey, you know what? Maybe you don't need to work full time. Maybe you could just work part time and that would be enough. And it really got me thinking. It's like, wow, I've been so stuck in this. I need to do this full time job. And because what I've been so frustrated about is like, I just don't feel like I have enough time to be creative, enough time to do my own thing. And it's like, well, yeah, maybe that's the solution, you know, just do something part-time, maybe even with this company or maybe with a different company or maybe with something else, you know, but like the whole point of this job was not to be the point for me. It was only to subsidize my creative career and subsidize my own personal business. It was only supposed to help me have a little bit more stability while I built some other things. And what I found is that I've kind of got sucked into the whole routine of it all. And it's like I'm starting to ask questions now. And I think you helped me before we start. This is probably partially why we're talking about this. But it's like kind of questioning this like, do I really need to be working 40 hours a week? You know, do I really need that? You know, and what if I didn't? You know, what could I do instead? And all these questions that it's opening up for me is giving me a lot of different options and opportunities in my mind already going, hey, wait a minute, maybe I've been a little bit stuck in the way I've been going about life.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, and that's the thing I think as well is that, you know, a lot of times these questions, especially the big questions, you know, they don't necessarily have an immediate answer. Sometimes we're not sort of close enough to the source of what's going on within ourselves in order for the clarity of that answer to come through. Because I feel like usually it's like when we get really clear, you know, we know what to do. You know, one of my favorite writers, speakers, philosophers, Jiddu Krishnamurti says like, you think you're confused, but you're not. Which I just absolutely love. You know, just, you know, it infers that there's just like, it's like, you know, when you actually get down to it, if you get really honest enough, there is no confusion. You know your answer, you know, what action that you need to take.
Dude, I have to say something. It's so true. You do know, but you just the answer is uncomfortable. Like I
Yeah.
know what I need to do.
Yeah.
When I started asking the questions, the answers became pretty evident pretty quickly. And it's like, and I'm like, and really, what I'm realizing is like, okay, like fear's coming up, resistance, whatever, and that's the answer is clear. But then the feelings that are around the answer are now what are really what they're, and the confusion of like, maybe I don't really know what to do. That's all just a way to dance around the feeling. I think you
Yeah.
bring up a really, really incredible point because questioning absolutely everything is often quite uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. It's because everything is up for demolition.
Yes.
Stuff that has been relied on, stuff that we're attached to, models that we have been going off of for a long time. It's like, well, if I don't have this, if I'm not going off of this, then what the fuck am I going off of? Um, it's a little side note, and the great artist knows that the present is the only place to go off of. It's actually the only safe place to live.
Yes.
Just to gloss over that little nugget. But I mean, I think that, what was I going to say here? Oh yeah, I was reminded of, and I'm somewhat paraphrasing this, but a quote from Pema Chodron, who said something along the lines of, awakening is continual annihilation until only what is true remains. And that questioning is this annihilation.
Yes.
We are annihilating the stuff that is bullshit. We are annihilating the stuff that doesn't work. We are annihilating parts of ourselves that we believed ourselves to be, parts of the world that we believed it to be, and it's fire. It's not a process of cooling, gentle waters. It's an element of fire that is kind of being invoked in that process. We are burning things to the ground.
Yes.
We're burning ideas and beliefs and attachments and whatever to the ground. We're burning it to ashes. And being left with only what won't burn. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's just like only
Yes.
the stuff that's just like, okay, I'm left with the stuff that won't burn, but that's good. That's a good thing. This is actually something that I can take with me. I'm not on faulty, unstable ground with whatever I'm left with now. And that's wisdom. It's wisdom. It's, and another thing from I'm getting quotes are coming to me in this moment, but like one of my favorite authors, Dan Millman, said something to the effect of, action turns knowledge to wisdom. And that questioning forces us into action, and it helps us take the things that we know and it makes it into wisdom. It's like, oh, okay, this is just the way I live now. This is just the way that I go about things, because I've seen and observed and acknowledged, within the core of myself, that this is the direction my life has to take.
Yeah, something that's coming up for me is kind of like another kind of good question maybe to ask is like, what am I willing to bet on? What am I willing to gamble on? And if you're not willing to gamble on yourself, if you're not willing to bet on yourself, I mean, what are you doing? Like the thing is the other thing is I think we try so hard to control, right? Like we want a guarantee. We want a delightful surprise. We want something that protects us from disappointment, that protects us from heartbreak. And we want that, but we don't really want that. We think we want that. And so, knowing what's going to happen, knowing how it's all going to work would make the whole thing extremely boring and unfulfilling. And so something I'm kind of reminding myself of is like your best life is when you bet on yourself. It's when you play a little bit of a game, when you gamble on, and it doesn't have to, like, you don't have to bet the farm all the time. And we've talked about this. You actually have been really helpful for me because my model, I think, for a lot of time has always been a little bit like bet the fucking farm. It's all or none, like go big, go home kind of model. But I'm beginning to realize more and more as I get older that although that can be appropriate sometimes, it's not the best model all the time. And sometimes it's about a little bet on yourself. It's a little gamble. It's a little fun. It's a little bit of a, why don't we try this? It doesn't have to, if we lose, it might be a little painful, but everything isn't devastated. But I think we got to start betting on ourselves. And I think that comes with, questioning what's comfortable, what's safe. Like, you know, um, how do I tie this back around other than to say, like, look, do I know how this is going to play out? No. But if it works out, what could I gain? If it doesn't work out, what could I lose? But then you focus on, you have to, the artist has to focus on the creative being, the person that wants to live a life, the artist mentality. You've got to focus on the way it could work out. People don't gamble because they're focused on the loss. But life is a gamble, man. You just don't know. You don't know when your time is up. You don't know when the day is up. And that goes not just for you, but your friends, your loved ones, and everyone. You don't know when it's up. So everything is a gamble. Like, do I see my mom today or do I not? And your mom could die the next day. And it's like, man, I should have. Everything is a gamble. Putting something off is a gamble, and it's about being honest and seeing that you're making a gamble all the time. And playing safe, by the way, and I'm saying this to myself as much as I'm saying this to everyone else, that is a fucking gamble. And convincing yourself that it's not goes back to my early point. Are you bullshitting yourself? And I think like what spun me into this conversation is really like, yeah, like I'm fucking kidding myself here because I'm gambling with my dreams here. Like, do I really want to bet on the security horse? Or do I want to bet on the dream horse? Like what horse am I going to put my life into? And like I said earlier, you can go down the path of security and people can kind of say, yeah, come down this path. It's the path, and you might be going, well, shit, maybe it's not the path for me, and like maybe a little bit of it, but maybe not all of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, maybe we don't need to push this any further. Maybe we kind of made the point, when you're questioning.
Yeah, I don't know necessarily what to say beyond it, just in response to I guess, the only thing that I had sort of in response to what you just said was like, you can go down that seemingly secure path. You look at it and there's the sort of this imagined life that's all sort of rolled out before you. And we hear the story all the time of, it's like, oh, my partner of all of these years is now deciding to leave me, and they're taking the kid, or this job, this company has gone bankrupt, and now don't know what, like there's these things of security that we hold on to, and then these things happen, and we know that they happen, and they happen a lot. But we still see it as being some sense of there's some sense of security in it all, and you pursue the secure path only to find yourself still in a place where you question absolutely everything. Where it's like, wow, I always thought this about marriage and this person, and that this would always be this way. And it just didn't work out that way. And so, I've witnessed this, with people close to me, who've had situations like that happen. And half of that battle is just coming to accept what's happened. Is just coming to accept that this is actually what's going on. Getting over resisting that this is what's going on. Kind of going past the in some ways, I guess the unuseful questions of like, why is this happening? Like how could this person, how could they, questions that are really more about blame and self-pity than about truly asking a question. It's like, okay, this has happened. What will you do now? What are the questions now that will lead you to whatever's next, that will lead you to the wholeness of your being, the wholeness of you as a person, that will strip away all of the things that were false, all of the illusions and delusions that you were living by, and leave you with something real that you know about yourself. I think that's it for me.
Well said, man. I like how you brought it to this point, burning things away and like and burning everything away that's bullshit, burning away all the needless stuff, and being left with something that's actually real. And I think that that is kind of the rise of the phoenix, right? It's like this, you burn everything down to find out what you really are, and I don't think that it always has to be devastating, although sometimes for some people, maybe it needs to be because that's the way they need it and that's the way they'll learn it. But I think asking questions is a gentle way of burning down the bullshit, and just taking it away little by little. And I think something you've been kind of teaching me has been to, work at it piece by piece, little by little, and chip away at it. And I feel like there are certain things where I do that, but there's certain areas where it's like, oh yeah, I didn't realize I could apply it to this, and little bits of progress, I mean, they add up, right? And if you just keep at it, if you just keep chipping away at it, you're going to kind of find out what it is underneath. So I think, to kind of summarize my thoughts on this, like questioning absolutely everything is about getting rid of all the stuff that's crowding your like true form, your true essence, and what it is that you are and what you're capable of and what's possible. And it's just getting all this crud out of the way, and off of you and out of your mind. And like maybe you need to ask, like, why do I need to be so secure? Or why do I need to control everything? Why do I feel like that's so important? And like you might come up with some uncomfortable answers. You might kind of come up against some things, some traumas and stuff like that. But, maybe that's the stuff you need to face. Maybe that's the stuff that's like dictating your life, but you won't know until you start asking the questions and start investigating. So I think the thing that I'm really realizing, and I know I've kind of taken a long road, but yeah, ask the questions to chip away everything that is hiding what you are underneath it all.
That's really good. And I know I said that I thought I was at my
Say
end,
it, man.
but
Go
I've got something.
Okay.
And it's like, I hope I can do it good because you would have left it off at a very nice spot.
You stole my thunder.
Well, yeah. But the thing that sort of occurred to me, as we're talking about all of these things, is that these questions that we're talking about are questions that, I mean, I suppose anybody could ask. You can ask it of yourself. Someone could ask it of you. But no matter what, these are questions that only you can answer. No one can tell you the answer to these questions. They're always ones that you have to find for yourself.
Thanks for listening to the show. If you got something out of this, if you feel it improved your life or your journey in any way, please take a moment to subscribe, leave a review, or share the episode.
You can also support us on Patreon, where we have tons of great bonuses. You are the ones that make the show possible and help us to thrive. Thank you for joining us.